Hey guys, I'm Rich from NeoWin, and today we're unboxing the Surface Pro 7. So, I'm going to tell you a little secret. I have not reviewed a Intel-based Surface Pro since the Pro 3. I bought the original Pro. I bought the Pro 3. I never really found the product that exciting after that. The Pro 4 was fairly exciting because they skipped from 4th gen to 6th gen Intel processors. That was Skylake, and it was a little thinner, it was a little lighter. I think the screen was a little bigger, and so that was cool. And then the Surface Pro 5, iterative 7th gen processors. The Surface Pro 6 was like super iterative. It's like they swapped out the 7th gen processor for the 8th gen, and they even used Kaby Lake R when everybody else was using Whiskey Lake. And I really had a problem with the Surface Pro 6, and I said this when I unboxed the Surface Laptop 3, that it didn't have USB Type-C. I can't review something and tell you to buy it if it doesn't have USB Type-C. This is like, it's the new USB. It's what we're using now. And so I can't suggest something without USB-C. It's almost a stretch to suggest something without Thunderbolt, but I don't think most people actually make use of Thunderbolt. And it's like if you need Thunderbolt, then you kind of know you need Thunderbolt. So it's going to be all right. Then you don't buy a Surface Pro. They have USB-C this year. It's USB 3.1 Gen 1, which I think is fine. I think the biggest deal for me is charging. It's one of those things, like, I don't want to carry around a separate charger for my Surface when my phone uses USB Type-C. My other laptops use USB Type-C. Everything uses USB Type-C. So they kept the Surface Connect port. And by the way, Surface Connect is also USB 3.1 Gen 1, as is the Type A port that's included. It's all the same. So the ones that Microsoft sent me, all right, we got the tablet. It's got a Core i5, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage, the red Surface Pen, and the red keyboard, which I'm excited about because I love it when they send me the colors that I actually like. It's exciting. Another thing that excites me about this year's Pro 7, by the way, I've actually said publicly on social media and such that I actually believe that this generation is the first good generation of Surface products. I've not historically been a fan of Surfaces in general. I think the Pro X is super cool because it's a beautiful device. It has a powerful ARM processor. They put the pen storage in the keyboard. And I love ARM PCs. I love the cellular connectivity and so on. I think that's a great product. I think the Surface Laptop 3 is a great product. I think they've redistributed the weight properly so that it's more lappable. It feels better to use. And of course, it has USB Type-C now. Like, I won't call something a good product if it doesn't have USB-C. And then Surface Pro, here's what's cool is that it has Intel's Ice Lake processors. Now, if you don't want to hear this, skip it because it might bore you. But Intel's Ice Lake, these chips are legit. Okay, they're good processors. They're 10 nanometers now, which is something you may or may not care about. What you should care about is that they all have Iris Plus. Well, I shouldn't say all, but most of them have Iris Plus graphics. Okay, so you're getting a big boost in graphics performance, which can matter in a meaningful way on a product like a tablet like this. Okay, I mentioned that I had the Surface Pro 3. When I had this, I used to have this weird bug where if you launched Photoshop, the display driver would crash every time. And it was such a pain. I remember I had the Core i5 model. I remember walking back into the Microsoft store and saying, like, hey, this thing doesn't work right. They replaced it for me. I went back in and I said, hey, this thing still doesn't work right. And the guy said to me, he goes, there comes a time in every man's life where he has to choose between a Core i5 and a Core i7. He goes, maybe we should swap this out and you could pay us an extra few $100s for the i7. And that's what I did. It still wasn't great. But the Iris Plus graphics will make a real world difference for something like this. Now, like I said, this is the Core i5 model because it gets deeper. Intel's 10th gen lineup is super confusing. Like, don't forget there's also Comet Lake, which is 14 nanometers and does not include Iris Plus graphics. So this is a Core i5. Unfortunately, there are 3 Core i5s in the Ice Lake family. Just Ice Lake, not even including Comet Lake. Okay, so it's the Core i5 1035, G1, G4, and G7. And then the Core i7 is just 1065 G7, and then there's a 1068 G7, which is a 28 watt chip. But the 1035, the i5 1035 and the i7 1065 are both 15 watts, quad core, 8 threads. The G number, though, that's graphics power. And you're going to want to pay attention to this. The i5 that's used in the Surface Pro 7 is the Core i5 1035 G4, which is the lower end of the Iris Plus tier. If you get anything called G1, which is only the i3 and the i5, that's not Iris Plus at all. G4 and G7 is Iris Plus, but G7 is better Iris Plus, okay? If you get the Core i7 model, it's G7, so you get the better Iris Plus graphics. Like, previously, there wasn't that big of a difference between an i5 and an i7. So it's something that's absolutely notable now. However, on the Surface Laptop 3, they use the Core i5 1035 G7. So the i5s between the Surface Pro 7 and the Laptop 3 are not equal. So, I mean, I'm sure this is boring a lot of people, but it's something that you want to think about if you're thinking about buying this PC, because you do get extra graphics power out of the i7 that you didn't get before. Okay, so we're going to start opening this up, right? And like I said, they're legit. I've reviewed a couple of Iris Plus, Ice Lake / Iris Plus machines now, and they're very good. It's a meaningful improvement over Whiskey Lake U series. And you know what? It's so interesting to me because Intel was just so very iterative for so long, right? Because 10 nanometer was delayed for years. So they would just keep pushing out these new 14 nanometer processors. Like, okay, it's 10% faster now. It's 15% faster now. It's like, okay, yeah. There were 2 generations of U series chips. In the 8th generation, there was Kaby Lake R and Whiskey Lake. And they're like, yeah, Whiskey Lake's 15% faster or whatever. And it's like, okay. This is an actual architectural change, and it's an actual meaningful improvement from 8th to 10th generation. And no, there's no 9th generation U series. So, 2 generations of 8th gen, then straight to 10. All right? So, if that's confusing to anybody, that just means you're paying attention. All right. As far as Comet Lake goes, I didn't say a lot about it because there aren't any Surface products with Comet Lake. But I mean, if you're interested, that's another iterative thing. There's a Hexacore Core i7 now. So here it is. All right. Not a lot of changes as far as design goes from the previous generation model. It still has fairly large bezels, especially compared to, say, the Surface Pro X, which has very narrow bezels, a much more modern design, right? We still have the flat edges around the sides. Looks very much like Surface Pro 6. So let's see what else is in here. I'm guessing it's just paperwork and a charger. Yep, Microsoft Surface Pro. All right, and then we're going to have, I believe, a 65-watt charger. And Surface Pros have always shipped with a 45-watt charger. That changes this year. And part of the reason for that, I'm going to open the other end if I can. Part of the reason for that is because they support fast charging now when the device is asleep. This is a 65-watt charger. It's also a Surface Connect charger, which I'm against all proprietary chargers these days, as I've been pretty clear about. You know what the thing about Surface Connect, like they finally added USB Type-C, and most companies did this a couple years ago, where they added USB Type-C, they kept their proprietary chargers, so that way, if you had old accessories, peripherals, chargers, whatever, you could still use them, and then you would transition to USB-C. And then the next generation of products had USB-C only. So, it is what it is. I'm still going to charge this with a USB Type-C adapter. And of course, the pen and the keyboard are sold separately. The pen is $99.99. This is not sealed for some reason, so we could just pull it out. They did, I love that they send me red. I feel like every time companies send me something that's not the color I want, and like, it's not a product I'm going to keep, so it's not something that I really bother to complain about or ask, So here's the keyboard. It's an Alcantara keyboard, which is Microsoft's thing, which they did kind of back off on a little bit this year. This is still called the type cover, which is kind of strange to me. There's nothing else in the box. It's kind of strange to me because on the Surface Pro X, they called it a Surface keyboard, not a type cover. So yeah, it does feel very comfortable. It's very soft Alcantara fabric, if you've ever felt it. Magnetic attachment to the side. Again, there's a lot going on here that's just very similar to previous generations of the product. Okay, there it is. That's the Surface Pro 7. Not a lot has changed since the Surface Pro 6. That's why the Surface Pro X was so interesting to so many people, because it was a redesign from the Surface that we all know and love. Like for instance, on the Surface Pro X, it's called the Slim Pen, and it fits right in here. It charges right in there. There's a little pen garage, and when you flip up, it's just sealed away, and it just charges while you're not using it. It's always there when you need it. I'm not a big fan of magnetic pen attachments just because they tend to fall off in your bag or something. Although Microsoft does use good magnets. The one thing about Microsoft Surface products, while I have historically hated them, is that they do use good parts. Like when they say something works, it works. And for instance, Windows Hello is one of those features that just works. The IR camera, other companies, they don't work. I mean, there are other companies that put IR cameras in there, and then you'll boot up the PC, and then it takes like 5 seconds for that thing to light up. And you're like, why not? Why didn't I just type my password? But no, with the Surface, it actually lights up right away. So there are little things like that actually matter. And by the way, I say historically thought it was a bad product because I think they're awesome products this year. I really think that this is the first generation of truly good Surface products across the board. And I think USB Type-C made a big impact on that. I think Intel Ice Lake made a big impact on that. I think the diversity in silicon that they used in this lineup really made an impact on that. I think the re-engineering of the products made a big impact on that. And the Surface Pro, by the way, is the only one that really wasn't re-engineered. Okay, so while this is finishing setting up, right, we can just take a look at the keyboard, which hasn't changed much over the years. This is pretty much the same that shipped with the Surface Pro 4. By the way, that was the thing I found most exciting about the Pro 4 was the keyboard. I don't know if you remember with the Pro 3, it had the keys, there was no space between the keys, which was a real pain. I actually went out and bought that keyboard for my Surface Pro 3 the day it came out. By the way, the connector on the keyboard has not changed at all over the years. This is the same as it's been since the original Surface Pro, which means you can actually take that original type cover and use it with a brand new Surface Pro 7. What it won't do is actually cover the display because they're different sizes, but the connector still fits and the keyboard still works. So let's just pull this out and we can see. Can push it down like that. And by the way, notice how easily I just pushed it down. Again, pen on the side, snaps right to the side, magnet. But let's just do that again because it's kind of cool. Okay, so there it is on top. And we're just going to, whoops. We can just push it down here and just see how easily it slides down. Microsoft is very big on that one finger hinge, we'll just call it. So we can just close that. So there it is. All right, so if we look on the top, we have a headphone jack. Not my favorite spot for a headphone jack, but that's okay. We also have the power button and volume rocker, which is the place that they've used it for, I believe, since the Pro 4. I believe on the Pro 3, it was actually on the side. On this side over here, we have our USB Type A and USB Type C port. No, they still haven't removed the Type A port. Then, of course, we have Surface Connect. So all the ports are on that one side. All ports are equal. They're all USB 3.1 Gen 1, meaning they support 5 gigabits per second data transfer speeds, docking, and so on. Yeah, so the only Surfaces that exist without a USB Type A port are the Surface Go and the Surface Pro X. So if you want that kind of legacy connectivity, you go for the Surface Pro 7. And that's about it. It's a tablet. It's 1.7 pounds, which is the same as the Pro X. The Core i7 model is a bit more at 1.74 pounds. It does feel very light. However, it does naturally get heavier when you snap the keyboard on, right? And of course, you're going to want to use that because not only is it a keyboard, but it's a cover. So yeah, so it gets a little thicker, gets a tiny bit heavier. It's still a super light device to carry around, but the design hasn't changed much. The same color. It's got that Microsoft logo on the back. All right, and yeah, I mean it's a tablet. There's not much else to say. It's like not other than the USB-C port, not much has changed visually in a while. So I did mention that if you need that USB Type A port, you would want to get the Surface Pro 7 instead of the Surface Pro X. Microsoft is really pushing this idea that there's a Surface for everyone. Okay. Yeah. So Surface Pro X, that's all about connectivity. It's thin, it's light, it's super easy to carry around, it's very portable. It's Windows on ARM, right? It's got the bigger display. This is still 12.5 inches. Sorry, 12.3 inches. The resolution is 2736 by 1824, 267 ppi. Of course, 3x2. You know, it's pixel sense. But yeah, so on the Pro X is 13 inches. You know, it's an awesome PC, but it's meant for a different use case. If you need that legacy support, if you need to run things like Photoshop and Adobe Premiere Pro on a tablet, that again, Pro 7. If you need things that are available on Intel chips like x64 only, Pro 7, because ARM64 only supports native ARM64 apps and 32-bit Intel apps. At this time, 64-bit app emulation is coming. So, and then of course there's a laptop, which, you know, if you want a laptop, that should be pretty self-explanatory, but also you might not like the type cover. You might not like using it on a lap because this can get a little uncomfortable. You know, it's obviously more natural to have that bigger, more heavier base that you'll get from a standard laptop. So that's who that's for. And then, of course, for power, you have the Surface Book, the Surface Book 2. Surface Book 3 should be out soon. Surface Book 2 is over 2 years old now, which is kind of weird. So hopefully they have something good planned in that area. But yeah, Surface Book 2 is about power, and then of course that detachable display. So yeah, Surface for everybody. So I'm trying to break down like who would buy what, because really I do think that Microsoft puts a lot of thought into who would buy which product. Like I keep saying that Microsoft should make a convertible, right? You know, just a laptop with a 360-degree hinge. But I think Microsoft thinks that it would overlap with the people that would buy their different products, right? I don't think they want to have a confusing lineup of products. I think Microsoft wants a Surface for everybody, where if you said, hey, I want to buy a PC, this is what I want to do with it. Which Surface should I buy? And it should be an easy answer. It shouldn't be, well, you could get this or you could get this. Like I want to be able to draw and take handwritten notes and also run Photoshop. All right, Surface Pro 7. You know, I want cellular connectivity and I also want to draw and all that stuff. All right, Surface Pro X. You know, I type for a living. Surface laptop. You know, I type for a living, but I also want to edit videos. Surface Book, you know, stuff like that. So I think that's what Microsoft is going for with the Surface for everybody strategy. They also obviously diversified the chip lineup this year, so that's also part of that. So anyway, guys, I'll have a review on this in a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. I'm Rich from NeoWin. Have a great night.